Welcome back to the Mentoring Enthusiast Podcast, a creative new storytelling and advocacy project from faithful friends out of Portland, Oregon. We serve the local church by training and overseeing volunteers who get matched with kids ages 6 to 9 who live within just a few miles of the mentor. This allows us to also serve families in Portland who recognize the lifelong benefits that come through stable adult friendships outside of the home. This episode is a continuation of the chat that program coordinator Sean Armsbury and I have been having with Christian author Drew Dyck. Drew has written about habits and self-control, Christians leaving the church, and the holiness of God. His new book is called Just Show Up: How Small Acts of Faithfulness Change Everything, a guide for exhausted Christians. I'm your host, Tim Cowley, Director of Operations at Faithful Friends. During this hour, we touch on quite a bit actually, including childhood adversity, Sean's winning strategies, parenting styles, generational differences, the superficial and fear-based downsides of social media, our finite nature and human limits on our empathy, the often uncomfortable awkwardness of roles we undertake, spiritual practice, how pain leads to beauty, what presence during pain can do for us, why we disengage real life by browsing Zillow and Redfin, and you'll get to consider for yourself whether you may be a sick soul or healthy-minded. Let's get to it. Have either of you guys run across those studies or articles that talk about adversity in childhood and how that sets someone up for success as an adult? Does that sound familiar at all?
I've read a lot about the importance of grit. Angela Duckworth, I think, is the one who wrote about that, the importance of it. And it's interesting too. I think adversity, it can go either way, right? Because it can really wipe people out, and it presents challenges that people like me who grew up in a peaceful, loving, two-parent family never have to deal with. And yet, I've also read things about there's a surprising number of amazing leaders who lost a father between a certain age as a young person and then kind of maybe had to become the man of the house or something. But how some challenges in early childhood can actually propel people to do incredible things as they sort of compensate for those. So that's encouraging. It means that, man, even if you had a tough childhood, it's not necessarily something that is going to be deterministic for your outcomes.
Yeah, and one thing I've read about that is the presence of just one positive adult can completely change the trajectory of someone's life.
Isn't that amazing?
And it's just
so cool.
Sometimes just an encouraging word. And oftentimes I tell people, I had a neighbor who didn't spend any time with me, but it was that encouraging word. He would just be heading out the door and, "Hey, Sean, you're going to do great things." He didn't spend any time with me. But how do I remember that?
Yeah.
Here I am. That was 40 years ago.
Isn't that amazing?
And so, yeah, and I think that's it, though. I think that's something that, in some way, God has made that a thing. You know, that happens in the heart or brain or whatever, and yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I was doing some research on this and ran across a LinkedIn article from 2015, and it talks about Elon Musk, born in South Africa, emigrated to Canada against his parents' will at the age of 17 because he didn't want to serve in the military down in South Africa, and he said he had a terrible upbringing, a lot of adversity growing up. One thing he worries about with his own kids is they don't face enough adversity. And then you've got, PayPal co-founder Max Levchin. I'm not sure if I said that right, but moved to the U.S. from Ukraine under political asylum, dealt with major respiratory issues while growing up, issues that he overcame in large part through his devotion to playing the clarinet. What many at the time saw as a crazy remedy, his role model grandma saw as a solution for the young child. And then, Richard Branson was dyslexic. Skinny Girl founder Bethany Frankel grew up with an alcoholic mother, absent father. Oprah Winfrey was born in poverty, suffered from childhood filled with sexual abuse. I mean, there's all these cases of people that have used that because it's like they're able to somehow use that adversity to find the strength to then overcome and become successful in their sphere. It does feel like in our culture, obviously there's a lot of people that do have adversity, but a lot of kids are just numb, I think. It's like, we have all these first world problems, and that's a very real thing. We're upset because something didn't go our way. But I almost feel like we need to strip it back. We need to get back to basics, and we need to actually have, we've got this helicopter parenting mentality, and we've got this free range mentality. I know where I sit on the things. You guys know where you sit on the things, but we've made everything so safe.
Yeah,
You know?
you can't nerf the world for your kids, right? I do worry about that even for mine. And it's funny because, ideologically, I'm in the free range camp. I'm like, I get it. I've read, what is it, The Coddling of the American Mind. Jonathan Haidt, the sociologist, he talks persuasively about this, the kind of bad outcomes we're seeing among people in their 20s now who grew up with that helicopter parenting. They were never unsupervised in play. And you guys know, like you ask people of our generation, when were you let out? I can't even remember. I was too young. My parents were like, okay, I guess we'll see you at, tonight when it gets dark, maybe. And they weren't negligent, but I just played all day by myself with my brothers, with friends, unsupervised. And there's so much benefit to that because you have to there's no one to adjudicate your disagreements or your fights. You have to hash things out. You learn these skills that now a lot of kids don't have to. But I fall prey to this myself because my son's like, can I walk to the gas station, Dad? And I'm like, oh no. And I'm thinking someone getting kidnapped or all these exotic scenarios that are never going to happen. But you feel almost like a bad parent. But man, yeah, it's a worry that if they don't have a little adversity, and of course you don't want something traumatic or awful, but they have to learn how to navigate the world on their own. And you do a disservice to them with the best of intentions, of course, if you don't let them do that.
Yeah. Have you guys seen how there was some map of the sphere that you were able to roam back in a certain decade, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, whatever. And now present day, it's are you allowed out of your backyard?
Right. I know. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, we saw this too overseas. We were in rural Africa in a village setting, and we are much more the free range style, recognizing that there's a lot of possibilities out there, but trying not to let that make us afraid. And so our kids were able to roam around the village with their friends. They weren't really alone. They were with friends that they trusted and stuff. Not to say there couldn't be things that could have happened, but they had colleagues, other missionary kids, other third culture kids who weren't allowed out of their compound or weren't allowed to cross the street. And there's reason behind a lot of that. I can't say that that's the wrong thing, but for us, we're just so sad that they never got to enter into the kind of friendships, the kind of relationships you get by being in these other places that can be bizarre, but at least now my kids have this experience that unfortunately I think a lot of kids aren't getting. What do you see with mentees these days, John?
Yeah, I saw a kid dribbling a ball down the street a few weeks ago, and I was like, what are you doing? Because, that was a common thing back in the 70s and 80s. Yeah. But you don't see that anymore. You see empty parks. You see empty basketball courts. And back when I was a kid, those courts were kind of full. Right down the street, Irving Park was full of people playing basketball. And nowadays you see a little bit of that, but you see less of that because everybody is in adult-run leagues. All kids are in AAU, and all parents are putting the kids in classic soccer and those sort of things. It's all adult-run. And I remember one time I had friends of the children, so I had this first group of kids that I mentored, and most of those kids were born in the 80s, and they kind of experienced, a little bit of what we experienced, which is, being able to go out and kind of do things and less helicopter parenting. And so when you put them on a court, they knew how to form teams and start playing and have this great game, and they're negotiating and arguing, and that's okay because that's life. You're kind of figuring things out and how to and do that. But then the second group of guys that I had, they were more born late 1990s and into the 2000s. You threw a ball out there, and they were waiting for us to organize it. Right. And that was a clear generational change. I saw it, and I said, "Oh my gosh, this is incredible to see this." I've been here long enough to see that difference, and they couldn't do it. They could not start a game without us mentors.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Scary.
My mentee is so excited by telling me, hey, that store over there, I go there all the time with my cousins. Or he'll be like, hey, do you want to stop by this convenience store over here on the way home? And I was just thinking, not really, and he's like, oh, I walk there. I walk there, and it's just this is an accomplishment for him. And I really need to enter into that. So next time I'm going to be like, hey, let's stop by that convenience store. Let's get a Coke. Tell me what's your favorite thing to get in here? Because it's he wants to have me enter into his world, and his family is able to see that, hey, we need to let this kid who's 10 hang out and walk around the neighborhood and do these things. I didn't see it when he said it, but it's like now I'm looking back on these things going, oh, this is his world. And I'm needing to be open to that instead of just being like, yeah, I don't want to go to the convenience store. Why,
Yeah. Well, that's great.
But
Love it.
yeah, moving to chapter 2. I know I don't know. We'll see what we get through. But this is the chapter obviously where Sean is one of the
the hero.
The heroes.
He's got to tell that story.
I won some trips. I'm a hero.
He won some trips. What's the rest of the story? You won some trips. Did you go on the trips? Did you? And how did you win these trips? Let's like give the quick little elevator talk about that.
Yeah, I mean, Drew laid it out in great detail in the book, and it was really 24 Hour Fitness was doing a contest for a trip to Hawaii. It was in the month of June, and every time you work out, you get an entry form, and so there's that, and there's a couple other ways you can get entry forms. And anyway, I worked out every single day, sometimes twice a day. I was in great shape, man. I was in perfect.
Good motivation.
Yeah. And you invite a guest, and you can get another entry form doing that. So I had a ton of entries, and the key is they were going to announce the winner at the end of the month, and you had to be present to win. And so I made sure that I was there, and there were hundreds of people just gathered around waiting to hear their name called, and my name was called, and I was like, I had never won anything like that. And so I'm just jumping around. I'm doing the Jordan, walking up to people and doing the Reggie Miller. Not that far, but
I love it. The choke.
yeah. Anyway, it was amazing to win that, and my wife and I took a trip to Hawaii, and it was hotel and airfare was paid for, and so obviously food and things like that we had to pay for. But we were fairly new parents. Our girls were, I don't know, 4, 2, and just born or something.
Wow.
And so the next year they did the contest again, and I went back and same thing. But that year, just like you said in the book, when they were saying, okay, we got some other prizes to give away, some water bottles and this and that, and I'm like, okay, let's just get to the trip. And so when they announced my name, that's the first thing I thought. I was, I won a water bottle. So I'm walking up there, and I don't know what people were thinking because I was not happy at all. So this is a water bottle. I was like, come on. And I said, do I still get a chance to win the trip? And they said, no, this is the trip. And so I was like, I went back into that mode of celebrating. And so, again, Melanie and I were able to take a great trip to Hawaii together. And as young parents, we really needed that. It was nice. Yeah. And we had her parents were able to babysit, which was great. And so year 3, I went back. Same thing. I'm feeling confident. At this point, everyone knew, like, I was the winner. Like, the people at the front desk, oh, yeah, you're the guy. And so I didn't win, though. And on the way home, I just felt like I had lost the championship. I was like, kind of like, my eyes were maybe tearing up a little bit. I was like, I remember calling Melanie, I was choking up.
You got so used to winning.
This is a drawing. Like, nobody wins drawings. And so I won for I lost that third year. And then the fourth year, I changed gyms over in 24 Hour Fitness in the Pearl. And like you said in the book, once again, I showed up at the day that the drawing was, and nobody was gathered around. There was one other person, and I'm like, okay, this is good. Then they started announcing it over the, the what do you call it, the mic, the
PA system.
The PA system, yeah. And I'm thinking, no. They're just us right here. And nobody came forward. Everyone was just working out like there was nothing. Because nobody wins drawings. Nobody wins like that. I was like the 8th name called. And, there was less cheering and jumping around because there's only one person there. I was like, okay, I'll take that.
That's what I love about the story, though. It's like, you had to be physically present, right?
Yeah.
And so it was just such a perfect little illustration for the concept of my book. I'm like, totally. Oh, that's great. Yeah. I think I initially heard it. Of course, I interviewed you about it, but through my brother Darren, he was telling me about all the things that you'd won. And I was like, oh, that's perfect because it's not just a matter of, filling out the raffles. You had to show up in person and be there. So I love it. And I'm very jealous that you've won 3 trips to Hawaii.
Oh, man. Yeah.
I've had to pay for my trips to Hawaii.
I'm definitely going to have to use this principle, I think. It's not the plotting principle. It's the just show up principle. Just be there.
Well, we started entering everything after that.
Sure.
Macy's, there's a Grease giveaway. Like, we're filling out everything. And I actually won quite a few things. Not more trips, but other things around that time, so it was fun.
2 or 3 experiences as a kid doing those coloring contests.
Oh, yeah.
For Easter. And I remember winning some of that stuff, like a huge chocolate Easter bunny and, this big basket full of candy, and I was pretty proud. That was I was a good drawer.
I was going to say, you had some talent. I mean, I just showed up.
Drew, on page 36, you talk about social media, how it can be so useful. We've already covered that a little bit. But, and this is the quote, instead of creating a global village, it's broken us into millions of little lonely islands, which is a powerful metaphor, broad but shallow. And you say we can only be present with a small number of people, but the impact you have on them is more profound. It's narrow and yet deep.
I think that was me writing to myself because I spent too much time on social media. And I think there's a bit of an illusion that you think, I'm going to have this broad impact through these platforms.
Got so many followers.
Yeah, exactly.
Change their lives.
And none of them are paying attention to you. But anyway, someone said to me that I spend a lot of time on Twitter or whatever it's called now, X. But I remember someone saying, having a lot of followers on Twitter is like having a lot of money in Monopoly. I guess it's impressive if you're playing the game. But and so you think, I'm going to have this broad impact. You invest a lot of time and energy there. And maybe you do. Maybe you kind of have a light touch on a lot of people's lives. But it's just that. It's pretty superficial at the end of the day. Because when you think back to your own life, the people that made a big impact on you, that came along at a crucial moment when you were a kid and spoke into your life, a mentor, a teacher, a friend, a pastor, it's usually not someone you just kind of heard their thoughts in passing. It's someone who is there for you, right? And so I think a lot of people fear that if they invest deeply in just a few people, they kind of kiss any chance of having a broad influence goodbye. But I think it's just the opposite, and I go to the example of Jesus. Yeah, he spoke to crowds, but he spent the majority of his time with 12 people, right? And invested deeply in them, and of course, changed the world.
Yeah.
And so, I think that's just a good, at least for me, as a bit of a corrective. It's like, hey, listen, let's not spend so much time online trying to get your ideas out there or influence people that you don't know, and at the expense of the people around you.
Yeah, and I think a lot of us went through that time period a couple years back, especially during COVID or during political cycles where everybody's saying whatever they feel is really strongly felt. And I feel like it ruined so many relationships. We're still not repaired from that. And I don't know if the next election cycle will look like that, because I feel like so many people have just said, look, I just can't use this platform anymore, or this platform, because I want to actually love people. But a lot of people are still there. So it's...
Well, you're more optimistic than me. I think it's going to be nastier than ever.
You're right. You're Canadian. You're realistic.
Oh, see, I think the opposite. I think fewer people are engaging in politics on. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not on X, but Facebook. I feel like there's less politics. Maybe.
You're right on Facebook, and I think it's like Facebook's like here for family pictures and my most recent accomplishment or whatever. Whereas X is the place, or Twitter is where people go to fight about politics. And I probably it's probably skewing my perspective because I spend too much time there. Yeah. Because whatever the controversy du jour or the news story or the cultural flashpoint, people are going at each other's throats, right? And you're just like, yikes. And so I get on there and I'm like, okay, I don't want to jump in the fray, and I just make dumb dad jokes. So that's my MO.
I saw David French just jumped off too. He's like, I'm done.
Yes, I saw that too. Yeah, although he went over to Threads.
Yeah, okay.
Which is like the
meta version.
Zuckerberg's version of Twitter, yes.
Yeah. How have you seen Twitter or X changing over the last, say, year or two?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's gotten worse. It's been I don't know, I just see videos of people fighting and just the hyper polarized political environment. You see it on the right and the left, right? And especially right now with what's going on in the Middle East, it's just at a fever pitch. And it's good in the sense that you can get news in real time. It's you're going to get everything a lot quicker than reading legacy outlets, but you also get unfiltered things. So you're scrolling and you'll see atrocities that people being shot, all this kind of stuff. So you got to be really careful. And something that I've realized I need to rein that in because, and I have a quote in the book. I'm trying to remember who said it anyway, but he said when your awareness outpaces your agency, you have anxiety, right? So you're aware of all these problems. You don't have the means to solve them. you're not even able to speak into it in a meaningful way that people are listening. And then all you're left with is the anxiety. And yet you feel bad for checking out. But I think just for your psychological health and your bandwidth, you have to. I think one of the biggest illusions we have is that we have unlimited empathy, unlimited attention. No, we don't. We're finite creatures. And so when you use it all on these big problems that you can never, we're kind of circling back to that, what we talked about, but on these things that you don't have an impact upon, there's not enough left over for the people that you do.
I know, John, you like to go to Italy, and
I do.
And sometimes
Who doesn't?
this is going somewhere.
Okay. Yeah.
Sometimes you see these little villages, and you just wonder, what would it be like to live here? And I love that you have a number in this book of like, here's the number of friends that maybe they're not our friends, but here's the number of people that you can sort of keep in touch with pretty well. I mean, what's that number? Do you remember that number?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I certainly didn't come up with that. That was, they call it the Dunbar number. And it was, I think, an anthropologist who came up with this number of basically like the natural kind of ideal number of people to have in your life as friends is 150, I think is the number. And there you can read more about how he comes up with that number. And it's been challenged somewhat, but some people are like, no, it's more like 300, and some people are like, no, it's like 70. But it's really a lot less than most of us have, especially when you consider social media contacts. And we're very we move a lot. And so you have a lot of people that you used to work with, and now, I mean, for the first time probably in human history, you keep in touch with the people that you went to elementary school with via things like Facebook. And at some point, it's too much. And you get inundated with tragedies. It's like, oh my goodness, this person I went to like high school with, they just got divorced, and this person got cancer, and this, it's too much sometimes. And again, back to the point of sometimes you have to kind of like intentionally shut it off a little bit so that you can guard your own psychological and emotional health. I think that's something I'm learning to do, even though sometimes I feel bad for doing it, right? Because you think, oh no, I should be engaged, I should care, but you only have so much of that capacity that you need to guard it.
Yeah. I know, speaking personally, there was times when I felt very unhappy about my current living situation and my current living city and my current neighborhood. Turned out next door was where I was getting a lot of these ideas of, man, this really sucks living here. This is really scary. There's all these things happening. And, I just was like, wait, I don't have to know any of this.
You would have been blissfully unaware before that technology existed,
yes.
Right? Yeah.
Or the Ring camera. It's like, here's what's happening all around you in your like radius of 5 miles. You're like, you don't need to know all of that.
Yeah.
And it's like, I want to know because I feel like I'm somehow more powerful if I know, but I've just felt a lot happier not knowing. I don't know, John, have you had any
oh my goodness,
checks
yeah.
that you've had to do?
I mean, for one, I'll start with, I live pretty much in between two police precincts. So like during the some of the protesting, rioting that was happening around 2020, I heard it every night. I heard the bullhorns and the helicopters and sometimes people marching through the neighborhood. So I was pretty much kind of in it. But I made it much worse by going on to Twitter at the time and watching all the videos of what was happening everywhere in the city. And I'm like, oh my gosh, it's terrible. And then you read the articles about how awful Portland is. There's much to be said about Portland and its condition. Absolutely. But I also found great joy in walking. Once I turned those things off, everyone was kind of normal still. You walk to the grocery store and people were still saying hello and all the tensions around race and all these different things. It's like, well, people are still okay. Like I'm walking through the park and it's just fine. And so I was trying to live in that space versus getting so caught up in just all of the news stories because to your point, it just produced so much anxiety in me. I mean, I was up late, 11 o'clock, watching just one more, fight on Twitter. Yeah. And it just drew me in. And yet it just wasn't good for me. It wasn't a healthy place to be.
And it's hard to fear your neighbor and love them at the same time.
Too, right?
Yeah. So if you're like constantly being fed a stream of fear, and of course that's what gets clicks and drives the news cycle, but not good for your soul.
And so I did go off Facebook. I was still on there, but for the most part, I was pretty much not active on Facebook because of all of that stuff. I went on Nextdoor, and I'm like, people are writing more than on Facebook. I'm like, these are our neighbors. And so turning that off, because I never had any negative, anything negative with a neighbor. Yet you go on there, and everything's like, but just in real life, just talking to neighbors and engaging hey, how's your garden?
Right.
Those kind of
No one
things.
puts that on there because,
Right.
hey, had a pleasant conversation with my neighbor today. Yeah, no.
Right.
I'm sure we've all made mistakes, especially during that 2020 time period. Online,
Yes.
it was not pretty for anybody.
Yeah.
Yeah. Let's talk for a second about this idea of being real. I loved your story on page 75 about your hospital visit and your pastor or a pastor that visited. Tell us that story.
Yeah, that's right. So we're in the hospital. Grace had a minor surgery. It wasn't a big deal, but we were a little rattled and shaken by it. And this is a past church when we lived in a different city. But one of the pastors from the church came to visit us, which I appreciated. Yeah. But it was kind of funny because he plops himself down in the chair beside Grace, and he doesn't even look at her. And he just looks straight ahead, and he's like, man, ministry isn't going so well. I don't know if I'm cut out for this. Starts telling me about the problems in the church. And it was just kind of funny, but I was like, man, I didn't say this, but I'm like, we need a man of God here. We need someone to pray for us, reassure us, right? And what I talk about in the book is that it just showed me that, we put such a high premium on authenticity, kind of saying what's in your heart or what you're going through. And that can be a good thing. But sometimes you just have to play the role that you've been given, because instead of kind of putting your feelings to the side, looking at what the person needs that you're trying to help and go, I'm going to play that role, even if my heart isn't in it. So that was a good lesson for me, because I think sometimes it's okay to, commit to a role, and regardless of how you're feeling, think of others first.
What kind of roles have you had to play that maybe have been odd or strange?
Oh, yeah. Well, they're all odd and strange at first, even being a husband and a father.
Yeah.
Like I say in the book, I remember when our son came along and I was strapping him into the car seat, I felt like I was stealing a baby from the hospital. I didn't feel like a dad, right? And yet it's cool, because I think roles get a bad rap. We see them as constrictive or confining, but they actually shape us and become the kind of forms through which we can have an impact on other people. So I encourage people, like, even if you don't feel entirely prepared or qualified for a role, if you feel God's leading you into something, or you see an opportunity or a need, more importantly, that you can fill, go for it. Fake it until you make it, as they say. Not that I'm not saying you can be totally unqualified or something, but it always demands going forward without feeling fully confident, right? And that comes with time, or it doesn't, and you just keep going.
Yeah, you probably shouldn't maybe try to do sign language on TV if you don't really know sign language.
Surgery, yeah, you probably don't want to just, blunder your way through that one.
But it's a great principle, I think for the imposter syndrome. That idea that, I'm just pretending. Everyone's going to know I'm a fraud. I don't know how to do this. Yeah. But you actually hear that people that are like top of their game still feel that way.
Exactly.
Not everybody, but I think I even heard that about Steven Spielberg. Or who knows though what's real and what's not. But I think that's just a brilliant reminder to us. You might not feel, and we're so about feelings. We're all about feelings. I think that's one of the things that kind of drew me to an Anglican style of service, maybe because it doesn't have all the feels. You're not trying to get that mountaintop experience through worship.
Yeah.
You're just you're going through these tried and true motions that speak somehow to the heart. And it's like you talk about this in the book a little bit about the kind of spiritual life. Well, this is actually Tish Harrison more, and it happens she's Anglican too.
That's right.
But she says the kind of spiritual life and disciplines needed to sustain the Christian life are quiet, repetitive, and ordinary.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah, that's hard, I think, especially for low church folks. Like, that's my background.
Yeah, mine too. Yeah.
Where it's, we're kind of suspicious of ritual and repetition, right? And yet, and I'm not saying, you have to be like Anglican but there's tremendous benefit in repetition. And I talk about this in the book, but I had a buddy he was talking to his kind of spiritual mentor, and he's like, my buddy was going through a dry stretch spiritually, and his mentor's like, just keep doing those boring things every day, like reading your Bible. He said, it's like push-ups, right? It's kind of hard, and you push through it, and you get stronger over time. And my friend initially was like, that doesn't sound right. What? Like communing with God is push-ups? But then he started to see the wisdom in it as he did it more regularly. And it's so often, I think this is a principle that if you sit around waiting for the feels, you might be waiting a while, right? But often our feelings follow our actions. And that's so true, especially in the spiritual life, that that if we do show up and do those things consistently, the feelings come, not always, but sometimes. And ultimately, that's not the most important thing anyway. It's just building those rhythms into our life.
I wonder if this is part of the reason why people seem to be leaving the church in America. Is it because they have been trained to think that they have to have the feelings, and you're not allowed to question things, you're not allowed to struggle with dark nights of the soul that could last for years, not knowing how to even talk to anybody about that without them questioning your faith. I feel like our culture is so focused on speed and professionalism and all these things that, it's like we've totally thrown out all this stuff that's just humanity and just that need to sort of struggle together. Yeah. Do you guys have any resources that you've leaned on to kind of help with maybe communing with God or switching things up when you feel like you need to kind of do something different in your spiritual practice?
Man, that's a great point, especially about feelings. In our culture, feelings are sacrosanct. And so it's like, I think a lot of people can have that impression that if the feelings aren't there, especially in my spiritual life, that's a sure sign that something is dramatically wrong, when it may not be at all. At this point, the Mother Teresa story about how she just felt the acute absence of God for years.
Yeah, good example.
Right?
Yeah.
And yet, an incredible spiritual giant, obviously. That's not an indictment of your faith because A, you don't have the feelings, or B, you're experiencing doubt. You open up the Bible and you see doubts all over the place. And so, I think that is one shortcoming. I'm not trying to bash on the kind of evangelical church, but sometimes we like to keep it peppy and happy and, oh man, we're getting the spiritual highs and we're chasing that. And then when that doesn't happen, we don't really have the vocabulary for that or the ability to walk with people through that, an extended period where you feel God's absence and where it's just not happening. And that's where the community is so important. I remember I heard one pastor open a service by saying, listen, if you're here this morning and you're experiencing doubt and darkness, I forget exactly what he said, but basically if you're going through this hard time, you don't even need to worship. We'll worship for you. Let the body of Christ carry you for a little bit. You can just be here and we'll carry you. And I think that's where the body is so important, that it can carry you through those dark times. But I think we need to be better at letting people articulate that without being freaked out that something's gone wrong.
Right. Yeah, and Eugene Peterson, you've got a great quote. I love that guy.
Yeah, he's pretty smart guy.
Yes, and I loved his biography. I don't know did you guys get to read his biography? Burning, I think it's called Burning.
Fire in My Bones. No, but it's on my list. Absolutely.
It was one of my favorites of the last several
Year,
years. And the guy we would be friends. I just have this feeling we would be friends. Ironically, his book was edited by a friend of yours, I believe.
Yes, Paul Pastor.
Yeah.
That's right, yes. And I had the honor of getting to interview Eugene Peterson a few times, including right before he died. And it was just super. And I remember my favorite moment interviewing him. This is a total tangent. But I'm interviewing him, and he's like, wow, a yellow warbler just landed on my windowsill.
Love it.
He's like, anyway, what did you ask? And we just went back to the interview. And I was like, and then when we were editing, I'm like, can we keep that in there? Because that is so Eugene Peterson. The warbler landed on his window. Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Love that.
He says feelings are great liars. If Christians worshipped only when they felt like it, there would be precious little worship. And one of my favorite stories in that book was he was early on in his career setting up a church, and he had this oversight committee somewhere that he had to keep on writing these updates and things for, and he just felt like they're not reading this. So he and his wife colluded together to come up with these ridiculous stories. He talks about having this affair with like one of the worship team and, getting drunk all the time. And, and he's like, yeah, you haven't even read it, have you? And they're like, oh no, we read every word. It took forever. And he and his wife were just loving it and laughing because they just felt like this is useless, but we're going to have fun with it.
Yeah.
And I just thought that's a great guy right there.
Oh, man.
I don't know. Anything for you, Sean?
I don't know if I'd add anything, but yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think just in my own walk, it's been good to be able to just be honest about those times when it's just not like. I think I told somebody when I walked out of church one day, and I can't even remember if I walked back in, but I told the person I was sitting next to, I just said I just couldn't today.
Yeah.
And that was okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there's times when church is also going on a hike in the morning, and that's okay too. Yeah. So.
I've been loving leaning on traditions that I thought were anathema when I was younger. Just went down to Mount Angel Abbey recently and just
I love that place.
wow. I mean, just being in a monastery setting and doing chanting with the monks, midday prayers. I would not have understood that would even be a draw, but it's powerful.
Yeah.
And you can kind of get swept up in this emotion that surprises you because it seems so ancient and foreign, and it's not Hillsong or whatever.
Yeah.
And yet it's so rich in history, and it's neat for us to have friends from these other perspectives. I think that can help show us how you can worship. There was Generous Orthodoxy that came out some years ago. Fantastic book because it talks about those strengths in all these different traditions. And each tradition also has its own weakness.
Yes, that's right. Yeah. No, and it connects. I think, especially I've seen among younger folks, especially more educated younger folks, a real attraction to, Anglicanism and some of those liturgical traditions. And I think some of the draw is because it does, like you said, connect you to the ancient church, these ancient practices, and tethers you to the church calendar and things like that. So it can be really enlivening for your spiritual life.
Yeah. Okay. Page 18. You talk about beautiful people, and we all get this vision in our minds of what a beautiful person is. But how do you define beautiful person?
Yeah, I wasn't talking
aside from grace, which
right.
you mentioned.
Yes, my beautiful wife. No, talking more about character. And the hard thing is, no one wants this, right? But to become a person who's beautiful in this sense, what I'm talking about, and it's a quote from the famous grief researcher Kubler-Ross. I don't have it in front of me. But she says, the most beautiful people are the ones that have gone through tremendous suffering and have emerged on the other side of that. And I think that's so true. And yet that's not what we want to hear, right? You want to become a moral, good person without going through that suffering. But often that's what it takes, or at least some hard things in life. And that's just an encouraging thing to me, like as I've gone through some hard times in life, or to other people who find themselves in a hard or discouraging season, to realize, what? God might be providentially working through this to make me into one of those beautiful people. And, it reminds me too of, I think it was Richard Rohr who talked about the authority of one who has suffered, which is such a great truth that often when you're in a tough circumstance or you're hurting, you want to hear from someone who's been there or who has suffered themselves. And so it gives you this incredible gift that you can come along beside other people in those seasons and speak into their life and be there for them in a way that's really meaningful if you've been through suffering yourself. So again, not the cheeriest topic, and yet it's so true. It's funny because sometimes I'll hear like a sermon from some dude who's like 25 and you can tell everything's gone great for him, and I'm like, man, I want to see you suffer. Maybe I'm sadistic. I want to see you suffer and go through some things first before you preach on Job.
And when you come around those people that are also, or that have also been through it, it's weird to think like, oh, good, I'm so glad that you've also suffered.
Right.
It's kind of a weird thing to say, but it's comforting to know that in some way it's comforting to know that there's someone that you're not the only one in the world that's going through things. That's
100%.
Yeah.
In fact, you need people like that when you're going through something hard.
Yeah. And it's sad to say that, though, like that there's someone else going through what you're going through. I mean, I don't really want you to go through this, but I'm glad that you're with me right now.
100%.
And we can talk about this.
Yeah.
So.
And I think we always have to have something. We think we have to have something in our mind. We have to have some pithy saying. I always think of Paul Ingalls from Little House on the Prairie. He always
Charles.
Yeah, Charles, he always had something amazing to say. And,
Right.
You're like, I don't have all this amazing stuff to think of. Maybe I can write about it later and wish I had said it back, in the past. But does it turn out that we can just be silent and be with people?
100%. In fact, sometimes having a great answer or something to say when someone's really suffering is annoying and off-putting, right? But if you're just there, and I say this in the book, it's like if you think back on the hardest times of your life, you may or may not remember what people said to you, but you'll always remember who was there, right? Who showed up for you in those moments. And so that's huge. And I think sometimes we avoid going to people when they're in great need or they're hurting because you go, man, I don't know what to say. This is awkward. Like, how do I help this person? I'll let someone else do it. But just being there is huge.
Yeah.
You showing up with a meal, just doing something small means a ton.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah, I think we need to let ourselves off the hook when it comes to trying to come up with some hallmark phrase. Right. Here's what I say when someone's suffering with this. I've already got the card for it, so I'm going to just go give them the card. I'm going to say that same thing. But yeah, presence.
I've actually told people when I'm going through hard times, like, you don't have to have an answer here. Mm-hmm. It's okay. I just appreciate you meeting up, and that's okay. And it relieves them too, because like I think everybody wants to have be a Mike Brady from the Brady Bunch. Gosh, I've been watching episodes of that. He was pretty good.
You might have a script though. So.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, but I think just that presence, just being there, and you don't have to have all the answers. It reminds me of that kind of mentoring spotlight thing they had on TV a number of years ago, and it just showed a mentor and a mentee at a art museum looking at some modern art of some sort, and they're just both staring at it. And they looked at each other and said, "You want to go get something to eat?"
Yes.
And what that was spotlighting was you don't have to have the answers. It was really the best illustration of just being together. That I had. It was just like that was simple. That's it right there. And that mentor had nothing to say about that art on that wall, and I wouldn't either. And I was like, "That's me right there. I don't know what to say or do, and yet here I am."
Awesome.
That's so relatable.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that really jumped out at me was, these times in my life where I go through scrolling Redfin and Zillow.
Oh yeah.
Because you're picturing
You
this
too,
life. Yes. And did you guys see that? I know I go to Saturday Night Live many times for things. Yeah. Did you guys see that sketch where they made it out to be like this, hot, yes. 1-900 number, and it's all these people
like
scrolling.
A 3,000 square foot house with mature landscaping.
Yes.
Yeah, they're getting all excited by this.
And it's all these middle-aged people looking at Redfin and Zillow. Yeah, they're just picturing. So yeah, disengagement. It's like we're picturing something different than what we have. How do we break free of that, and how do we stay present in where we are?
I think the first thing is just to be aware of it. And this was my thing, right? In the pandemic, actually, it got me. I started spending way too much time scrolling on Redfin and Zillow.
Yeah.
And then getting just downright irritated with my house. My house is fine. It's like, it's a normal family house with 4 bedrooms and a garage, right? So it's fine. But all of a sudden, I'm like, no, it doesn't have a sauna. I don't have a pool. I need a library. The kids need a rec room. Like, I'm suffering over here, right? It was awful. And it was Grace who snapped me out of it. And she's like, we're never going to afford those houses. And I'm like, not with that attitude, we're not. But it was becoming a bit of an escapist thing for me because I was spending it's embarrassing. I was spending 2 hours a day on these stupid apps. And they were a total fantasy. And it was just my way of checking out. And I think it's good to look at your life and go, okay, and it's fine to have outlets and hobbies and all the rest of it. But if you find that there's something that's wasting a lot of time and consuming you, and you're using it to disengage from the people around you, and that's what I was doing. I get bored around the kids, maybe, and I just pick up my phone and start scrolling. That's a bit of a warning sign because, and then to a deeper level, maybe you're trying to slake some sort of underlying spiritual thirst through that, and it's never going to work, right? Mm-hmm. But it's sometimes a clue that, hey, I got some soul work here to do, and maybe I need to find healthier ways of dealing with whatever's driving this.
Yeah, that's good. Well said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of, I think we have to be very conscious of, hey, I've been doing this a lot. Why am I doing this? Why am I, on my news site all the time? What am I looking for? Am I really that bored, or do I want some kind of hit of something, like you're checking Instagram for likes or whatever it might be? It is just that awareness. And then do you replace that with something? Do you... Yeah.
I was just telling a friend this morning, I said, imagine the skills I would have if I wasn't on just scrolling on my phone for the last 10 years.
Right.
Then I'd be able to maybe build that house that I'm looking at. I'd be able to pour concrete and build a basketball court and do my own drywall. Who knows? Because I've spent so much time scrolling, and living in this fantasy life here on this 6-inch, 4-inch screen or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm impressed by one thing because we're friends on Duolingo.
Oh, okay.
And you have got a streak like nobody would believe in Italian. What's it at?
Oh, man. What is it? Oh, it's over 1,000.
It was
like
years worth.
1,200. Yeah, it's about 3 years worth almost. And that came out of
Wow.
2020, I think.
Yeah.
My friend Carlos and I, we said, hey, man, no more Facebook. Let's take this time that we're spending on Facebook and put it towards something that's going to just like in 3 years, we'll be like, man, like I can speak Spanish now or I can speak Italian.
That's awesome.
But that's kind of the point, yeah. Like,
10 minutes a day.
Yeah, I could be laying drywall, man. Like I don't know how to do that.
Right.
And instead, but I'm very good at whatever. I mean, everything on the phone.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's true. These are trade-offs that you're not even aware of, right?
Yeah.
And that's the terrifying thing. I mean, there are we live in a time when there are billionaires that are spending billions of dollars to try to keep you on your digital devices for as long as possible.
Yeah.
And sometimes you don't think of it, but man, that's a trade-off because you could be doing other things with that. And there are so many, and that's a great example. It's like, you know what, instead of just scrolling social media, let's learn a language. Still on a device, but who cares?
Yeah.
Or if it's like, oh, I'm playing video games till 3 a.m. Maybe I should just go with my friends. That's a lot healthier, just to hang out. So yeah, I think it's good to kind of take a clear-eyed look at your life and how you're spending your time and evaluate that.
And to also be okay with a little bit of it too. Like we don't have to beat ourselves up for playing another game of bid whist.
That's right. Yeah, you see these influencers are like, I wake up at 4:30 and run half marathon and then work for 12 hours. Right. And you're like, okay, man.
Yeah, great.
Good for you. Shut up.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet there's a place for systematic neglect.
Yes. That's right.
What's that all about? Systematic neglect. That's page 143.
I wish I could take credit for coining that, but it wasn't me. But this idea that, man, you got to choose some things that you're going to neglect, that you're not going to pay as much attention to, because you can't do it all. You are limited. And that's in my previous book I wrote on self-control, learned a lot about willpower. It's interesting. Basically, researchers find out that willpower is a finite resource. Like you can't just exert, effort indefinitely. It runs out. Anyway, so when you're looking at yourself realistically and going, I got a limited amount of time, I even have a limited amount of willpower, I have to invest it wisely. And that means looking at my commitments and going, is there something here I can drop? Because if you're going to show up for the things that are truly important, you got to make sure that you're strategically neglecting some things. And as you know from the book, my thing is my yard. It's the spin I put on it is that I have the most environmentally friendly yard in the neighborhood.
It's currently getting certified, I'm sure.
Providing all the weeds for the neighbors.
Yes, yeah. I'm a humanitarian, really. And then I don't have to scream at the kids, get off my lawn.
Yeah, that's right.
So page 164, this concept comes up, and it reminds me, I'll get to the concept in a second. I did some interviewing with a local nonprofit, and outside of each person's office door, it kind of had their, so-and-so's a woo and a, strength finders, I think, which is like, oh, that's kind of cool that you kind of pigeonhole this person and know exactly what they're going to be like. And it's like, that's who I want to be friends with. And this is who I do not want to be friends with, and so you talk about the healthy-minded and the sick souls. I mean, imagine if that was up right outside your office.
Wow.
Hi. I'm Tim. I'm a sick soul. I mean,
no one's put that in their social media bio.
Right. It should be though. Right now, I don't know. And the secondhand smoke of doubt. It's like, it's interesting for one that it just breaks it down into two instead of it being like the Enneagram where it's like, what's your wing?
Probably because this is like was William James, the great. Was he a psychologist? But yeah, he coined those categories. the healthy-minded believer is spiritual categories. The person who's just like, hey, I take God at his word. I'm happy to live out my life. I believe. I don't really struggle with doubt. I don't go through dark nights of the soul or anything like that. And then, like you said, the sick soul, and that is the person who's just like, oh man, is this true? And they just kind of agonize over the big questions of life. And they have, and it's a struggle to believe. But he wasn't using the sick soul as a pejorative. He was a sick soul, and he talks about actually these are people, though, that cling to faith in spite of these challenges. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, although it's a harder road. And so I thought that was just kind of interesting for me because I'm in the latter category, unfortunately.
You self-identified in the book.
Absolutely, yeah.
Appreciate that candor.
No, and yet when you open up Scripture, I think there are some sick souls in there by that definition.
Yes.
When you read all the laments and the imprecatory psalms and the lamentations, and so hey, that's okay. Just keep bringing it to God.
Yeah, for sure. Well, Drew, thank you so much for coming. It is awesome to be with you, and we're excited about this book. Sean, have you read it yet?
I have.
Well, he's in it, so you at least read that part, right?
I just want to say that I would love for more of our mentors to have copies of this.
Oh,
I think it's great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's deeply encouraging.
Yes.
And I don't say that about most books. It actually makes me want to read some other books that you have written because I feel like maybe there's wisdom in those too. And I've been meaning to, but the fact that this was so, such an accessible book, easy to read, quick, and yet full of nuggets. Yes. I did a lot of highlighting.
Yeah, so good. So good.
Thanks, guys. That's super encouraging. Yeah. Always good when someone other than your mom reads your book. That's I appreciate it. And this has been a fun conversation. Yeah. It's fun. It's been really wide ranging too. We've covered a lot of ground.
We did.
But I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah. And then we're super excited about the idea that you're trying to mentor a kid. Is this a family match you're looking to do?
Yeah. Well, it's not finalized yet, but we it's a little 8-year-old girl.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so we're excited. And even our kids, we haven't nailed down everything, so we're not trying to get them too excited, but they're excited as well.
Right, just in case it changes
or
something.
Right, yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, you'll have a lot more stories, a lot more content.
There you go.
We're really excited for you.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We're excited to have you part of the family.
Thank you. Thank you. Excited to be part of it. Absolutely.
Interestingly, my wife had just visited some friends out in Grand Rapids that had just moved there from Portland, and turns out their neighbor is the person that has a Drew Dyck parody account on Twitter/X.
Some people have way too much time on their hands. That's all I'm going to say.
I don't know about that.
Is this a personal friend? Have you met this person in real life?
I have, although I didn't know him before he started the parody account. And we got together, and had a meal when he came through Portland. This was probably a year or two ago.
Oh.
And so I can't divulge his name because then it ruins the whole thing.
Yes.
Now, the insulting thing is, though, that so many people on Twitter, they're like, Drew, you started that parody account, didn't you? Just to make yourself look more popular. And I swear I did not. It's a real person. But we joke around a lot. And like I said, he's definitely got too much time on his hands. But I'm glad that he's wasting it on me.
Yeah, that's an act of love.
It really is.
What's up with the squirrels, though?
The squirrels, yeah, you're right. I don't know. And I think he's using some AI thing to generate the image of the
they're
squirrels.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So that's...
All right, well, we'll have to
and he jokes that he lives in my attic, which is not true, but,
All right. Well, anything else that I missed?
No, this has been awesome, guys.
Okay,
and it's
great.
And I so appreciate what you guys do. It's just huge. And you guys live out the message of this book better than me, frankly. So I'm just blessed by it and glad to know you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
What's your next book concept?
I don't know. Give me an idea.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
All right. This is for
something
our
about
listeners.
squirrels? Something about squirrels?
Squirrels and addicts.
Yeah. We'll see.
Oh, Sean's got some idea.
Theme on my Facebook. Someone said, "Why do you talk about squirrels so much?"
What's with this guy and squirrels?
And congratulations on making it through a very long episode of the Mentoring Enthusiast podcast. If you'd like to get in touch, leave a note on the podcasting platform or drop us a line via our website at ffpdx.org. We'll catch you next time.